In our previous video, we were focusing on river and stream pollution and pollution assimilation by rivers and streams. Now, earlier we discussed Lake Washington. Lake Washington was an example of where a secondary treated sewage effluent went right into a lake. So lakes still do get polluted. Why? Well, it's because downstream of our streams and rivers are the lakes. And many of our lakes, especially in the inland part of the United States, are human-made. They were made by dams. So these lakes do not necessarily have natural flushing mechanisms like rivers or streams. The water comes in. If it's tied up with sediments, it may settle out. And these pollutants may be detained or retained in the lake. They may get entrained in the lake system. And nutrients, particularly related to agriculture if you're in rural America, as well as sewage waste if you're in urban areas or suburban areas, these can build up in the lake water column and the water sediments. And when I use those terms, urban or suburban areas, sometimes the pollution from an agricultural source far away will actually find its way into a river or stream that will then make its way to an urban setting where there may be a lake and a community located along that lake. The nutrients that tend to accumulate that we're most concerned with are nitrogen and phosphorus. And in this example here, you can see standing water near an area where there's a failing septic system. Over here we can see cattle down near the stream, and cattle will use their drinking water source also as their toilet. And we know that fecal matter, whether it be from humans or animals, such as cattle, contain a lot of nutrients, including nitrogen and phosphorus. Those nutrients can get trapped in the lake system. Now, you can have excessive nutrient buildup in these lakes, and that can lead to harmful algal blooms. And not only do we have problems with harmful algal blooms from an economic standpoint, they can also cause health problems. So there are certain genera of cyanobacteria. So cyanobacteria are called blue-green algae. There are also green algae or plant algae, but the blue-green algae are the ones that we're more concerned with regards to producing toxins. There are a variety of toxins produced. Microcystis aeruginosa is one genera and species of cyanobacteria, and it produces microcystin. But there are other blue-green algae. One group used to be called the Anabaena. Their name has changed a little bit, but they produce anatoxin. There are other toxins called cylindrospermopsin, and there are more toxins than just those. Those can be harmful to fish, they can be harmful to humans and dogs. And here's just an example of some of the coloration you may see on a water body when one of these blue-green algae blooms occurs. And these blue-green algae blooms occur for a variety of different reasons, some of which we fully don't understand. It could be that there's an excessive amount of phosphorus but not enough nitrogen for the green algae. But there are certain blue-green algae that can fix nitrogen. They may be able to use nitrogen that's not available to the plants, but maybe make it available to themselves and thrive in that environment. There are other factors and balances in play. Sometimes there are certain foraging habits of the things that live there that may eat the green algae and create a favorable environment for the blue-green algae. Just to look at this image here, we've got Lake Erie, western Lake Erie. You can see how green it is from even satellite imagery that's looking at the blue-green algae bloom in progress when that image was taken. These cyanobacteria plumes, or blooms, bloom is probably the better example, but this is definitely a plume of cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria blooms can deplete oxygen, especially in the evening and just before sunrise. There's a lot of photosynthesis that's going on while these blue-green algae are out there during the daytime. And at night, they suck the oxygen right out of the water. So in the morning, there might be these big fish kills. And why does this happen? It's because they still do their respiration. And then when you have fish kills, you might have increased eutrophication, because guess what? All the nutrients that are tied up in actually these fish then get consumed by the lake system. And this becomes a vicious cycle. A positive feedback loop can occur. So what is eutrophication? Some people have referred to this as self-feeding. The word troph, where does it come from? You may have heard the term autotroph in a biology or zoology class, or maybe even heard the term used in some other area. But eutrophication is a term that we use in the study of lakes and water bodies to describe this process of nutrient enrichment and this gradual filling into the lake. So eutrophication often involves the addition of various nutrients or fertilizers, such as nitrogen and phosphorus and potentially potassium. Eutrophication occurs more in seawater if you add more nitrogen. Usually seawater is nitrogen limited, but freshwater is often phosphorus limited. So phosphorus goes into the system, excess use of it finds its way into the water. If the plants don't need it or it rains really heavy, it runs into the water, and then it allows for this growth of algae that may shade out even plants. Fish begin to die as oxygen levels fall, notably at night. The increased nutrients continue to be absorbed by the algae. As the fish die and the algae even die, there's more decomposition, and even the decomposition of the dead algae uses up oxygen in the water. So this becomes a vicious cycle. We call this a positive feedback loop. More nutrients causes more algal blooms, causes more fish kills, which then causes more algal blooms, which causes more fish kills, which even causes more algal blooms and more fish kills. So increased nutrient inputs increases the productivity, so it increases the amount of plant life doing its thing, more photosynthesis, but it also results in speeding up everything. The fish get bigger quicker and fatter, and everything's wonderful at first, looks like it's going to be more productive, but then as those things die off, we have more decomposition. As more decomposition occurs, there's more demand for oxygen. As there's more demand for oxygen, we start to get to the point where there's less invertebrates in fish. So suddenly things stop eating the plant algae, and then even the blue-green algae can then start to take over. And as the algae mats start sinking to the bottom, they grow, they sink to the bottom. It just becomes a vicious cycle. Lakes can go through this succession process where we start off with natural eutrophication, where it's natural. This is how it usually happens. We have very few actual natural lakes in the eastern United States. Kentucky has very few. Reelfoot Lake down near the Tennessee border where the Mississippi River moved, that's one of Kentucky's few naturally created lakes. Most of the lakes in Kentucky, most of the lakes in Ohio, most of the lakes in Indiana, the reason why those lakes exist is because we built dams. The old lakes that used to exist at best were oxbow lakes formed where the rivers had just changed course. So we don't have a lot of these lakes, but in the upper Midwest, Minnesota, and then the Great Lakes, they go through, we would want them to go through natural eutrophication. These lakes start off oligotrophic, then they move towards mesotrophic, and then they move towards eutrophic and hypereutrophic. This process takes thousands of years to go from oligotrophic to mesotrophic, but then as you get closer to eutrophic, it takes hundreds of years. This is in a natural system. In a human impacted system, a man-made system, you could take an oligotrophic lake, you could dig a hole in the ground, and some lakes like Laurel Lake started off as mesotrophic or oligotrophic because the national forest was there. It uses up a lot of the nutrients. But you could change the national forest and you could pump sewage, or you could get rid of the national forest and farm it a lot and have a lot of manure spread to make the crops grow there quicker. And you could speed up the eutrophication of that lake. Lake Reba here in Richmond, Bluegreen Lake here in Madison County as well. They've been anthropogenically influenced. Eutrophication's happening quicker because of fertilizers, pesticides, erosion, and sedimentation. non-point source pollution from septic systems from homes. All those have made the local lakes end up in this eutrophic condition, and we continue to speed it up. And you can see the accumulation of sediments at the bottom of these eutrophic and eutrophic lakes. So an oligotrophic lake, there are three major lake types: oligotrophic lakes, mesotrophic lakes, and then eutrophic lakes. And you can have various deviations. You can have hypereutrophic. You can see down here, catfish. Really no catfish in an oligotrophic lake. Mesotrophic and eutrophic, catfish. Also, you see more vegetation, more filling in eutrophic. So we're going to discuss what makes a eutrophic lake different from an oligotrophic lake a little more clearly in the next video.